and we have a very special guest today. Max Spiers is here with us, and he is a whistleblower, a former MK Ultra person who's coming out and bravely stepping forward to share his story. So welcome, Max. Thanks very much for being with us.
Hi, Joel. How are you?
So why don't you just jump straight into it and tell us what your background is and how you came to be involved in this strange world of mind control and New World Order and everything.
I'd always had a fascination since I was a kid with things that were hidden and things that were like UFOs. Even from like 3, 4, 5 years old, I was interested in UFOs. And I'd had a lot of bizarre experiences when I was a child. When I would wake up in the night, I would have some strange things happen to me. And so as I got older, I wanted to find out what those things were because they had affected me so much and they had kind of filtered through my daily life. Everything that I'd done as an adult seemed to go back. I'd get triggered and then go back to these moments as a child, so I wanted to look more into it. And then, this is a summary really, and then when I turned 31, I had a whole lot of memories come back at one time over a period of 2 weeks. And over this 2-week period, every day and every night, these memories would come back, and they contradicted what I had thought had happened to me when I was growing up. And so the further I looked into them, because they were extreme, the more avenues opened for me. And then I started to meet other people who confirmed these things. And so now I'm here, I'm 36 years old, and I'm here now because it's led me to this point.
Well, wow, that's incredible. And I think people first heard about you in general when you did the Project Camelot interview with Michael Prince. Is that the first kind of main public interview that you did?
I'd done radio interviews a year, 2 years before, in connections to the Super Soldier Summit with Laurie and Fenton in 2012. So I've done radio interviews. In terms of on camera, that was the first one that I've done.
And I know you mentioned that that was obviously a very controversial interview, and obviously you and Michael are two different people with different views and values and everything. Was there anything you wanted to say about that interview that anything you wanted to kind of expand upon or clarify or talk about?
That's jumping into it kind of deeply. I wanted to kind of paint a picture from the beginning, but in terms of that, there are a lot of ideologies that I disagree with in terms of what Michael believes, and we've kind of come to a fork in the road in how we believe things should be done. I never held a lot of the extremist regards that he holds. I never did, but I have a lot of respect and a lot of heart for Michael because of what he's been through, and there are a lot of parallels and syncs in connection with me. From a child, I remember him from when he was a child.
Right. Okay. Well, then let's just back up a little bit. So you mentioned that you started remembering things when you were 30 or 31. Was it traumatic and difficult for you to kind of go through this, to realize that you'd been deceived and lied to, and that nothing was what it seemed?
Yeah, that was the most difficult thing about it. I think that betrayal is really the key word in that. But it was very difficult on my psyche because when there's been parallel lives, because it's almost like there has been dual lives lived within my lifetime, and a big, almost like a shadow side of myself, where a whole lot of other things have happened, and that I'd always been. I think generally when people are looking into the MK Ultra subject, if you become obsessive with it, if you keep trying to unearth things to do with it, there's a reason for it, and usually around the age of 29, 30, 31. There's a period where there becomes bleed through in the mind, in the memory, because this is a lot of hidden memories that go into how an MK Ultra slave or a Monarch slave or any of these things is created. But there comes a breakdown in programming around that time, and you begin to remember. And either at that point you will refuse it, and a lot of the times people will go on. There's a lot of psychiatric medication that can be used because a lot of the psychiatric side of this medications are created to repress those memories. There's a false memory foundation, and the pharmaceuticals used will shut that down. So you either go into a tailspin and refuse to accept it, or you'll push through and come out the other side and realize that something else has gone on. And I did. I came through the other side of it and realized that it was important that I had to accept it, because there's a huge part of the denial. When you deny it, you then push it down further. The alcohol, drugs, pharmaceuticals, any of those things repress that, and they compound those feelings and hold you into the prison that it was created in the first place to do.
Yeah, that's very well said. And so what stage are you at now with your unraveling of all of this? I mean, how much do you think you've uncovered and integrated back into yourself, and how much do you think there's still to uncover?
I have done a lot of work. Certainly in the last 5-6 years, I've done a lot of work. Every time I think I've understood what's going on, there seems to be another level to it. There seems to be another layer to it. I've had to come to the conclusion that really I don't know anything, because there's a lot of arrogance associated with this too, because there's a lot of messianic complex, Messiah complex connected to it, because when you realize these things, people start to think that they are greater than or better than everybody else, because you are having a whole side of the world and realizing a whole side of the world that most people don't tap into. And when you realize that you're privy to it, you think that you're greater than, and that isn't the case. Most of the population is traumatized on a grand scale. And we're repressing all those things, and I can go into how that's done, but I think it's important to understand that you never really know, and until we collectively understand it, until we collectively all realize that something's been done to everybody on a grand scale, we're not going to be able to move through it. And as an individual, I'm identifying that it's been done to me, but hopefully other people will realize that it's been, in this country, there's about almost 2 million people who've gone through the MK Ultra program. If there's almost 300 million, that's 6-7% of the people here. So that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And I really like what you said about how the population of Earth as a whole is under some kind of spell, or is under some kind of mind control, because it's, when you look at the mass hypnosis that's going on, how people just get brainwashed so easily and buy governmental propaganda so easily, and how the government's able to pull off false flag attacks like 9/11 and lots of other things, and people just buy it and they don't question things. It's certainly, the whole subject of mind control is something that affects every living person on Earth.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that the MK Ultra, MK is the German word for control A, so it's mind control A, KONTROLLE, I think. That was that version of mind control, because mind control has gone on since forever, since the beginning of time. You can certainly look in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and which is 4,000 years old, I think. It will give you directions on how to create a mind control slave. So this has for sure been going on at least since then, and I'm sure far before that. But something happened in the 30s and 40s where it was refined and it became a science, it became an art, and as the transference of energy at the end of the Second World War went on into kind of a new eon in the 50s and 60s, which was a growth of a new kind of generation of people, that the mind control was harnessed and used in a far more broad way. So it was done en masse. When they realized that there was too many people to control overtly by force, they had to come up with another technique which you could control the masses with, and that was done through mind control. And it's been, at this point, it's so refined down digitally that it's not even done the same way it was done 20 years ago, the ones that I was involved in. But, I mean, I can go into what I understand about Project Monarch, which is an extension of Project Bluebird, which was essentially to create sex slaves or rich slaves for SRA, which is satanic ritual abuse. If you want me to go into that.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about that? I don't know if you have seen Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut, but there's a famous scene from that where you know there's like a satanic sexual ritual going on, and you know, strangely enough, Kubrick died 4 days before that film was released. But yeah, why don't you go into that topic?
Okay, I can tell you that Kubrick was an insider, and he had access to a lot of the higher knowledge in the mystery school work, the Egyptian mystery schools and the Sumerian mystery schools, and understood Gnosticism to the point where he could portray it to about probably 30 to 40% of what the truth is, because the scenes in that movie are highly dumbed down, highly tamer than what really goes on. That movie as a whole is an entire ritual, actually. It's a ritual from beginning to end. Certainly that's a whole other topic. But the scene in there is, it only goes into it to a point. It doesn't show you the connection. I mean, sex and death are what they're trying to pull on. And sex and death, the birth and creation, which is the number 13. Which is they're obsessed with, and they're trying to harness sexual energy, which is Kundalini energy, and by using, which was kind of famously perfected by Aleister Crowley in the 20s and 30s, and he realized that if you use creative force energy, Kundalini energy, in terms of ritual and magic, that you can manifest whatever you want through that. You just have to find the select people who have high energy, high Kundalini energy, use them. So you have to create an MK Ultra Slave, which we can go into at some point. Use them, bring them into the ritual, harness that energy, harness the sexual energy that way, and use it in terms of magic. Use it with magic, obviously black magic, and then use that to summon lower vibrational deities, and then manifest a reality that way. So I think essentially these beings, or these people who are doing that, don't have that type of energy themselves. I think that they have to steal it or harness it from other beings to create the reality that they want. So it's through ritual and sex and death, they're manifesting a reality that way. It only goes into the sexuality part in the Eyes Wide Shut. But so it's probably 30% of what goes on there.
All right, thanks for sharing that. And then before that, you were mentioning that you know, you had some knowledge about how MK Ultra slaves were used as sex slaves.
Yeah. Okay. So that you can, I mean, essentially what happens is they usually take a child before the age of 3, and through trauma, any physical trauma or sexual trauma, you when a child, I mean, at any age really, but they usually pick a child before the age of 3, and they like to do it at the age of 3. 3 is a number for them that's significant. They abuse the child in whichever way they decide to do it, and at that point, rather than consciously go through the trauma that they're going through, the child will separate off, so it doesn't have to live the trauma, almost separate from the body, and it's almost finding a spot inside themselves so they don't have to go through what they're going through. And when that happens, it fractures the mind almost into a honeycomb, and then that's how you manifest other personalities. Now, there are certain traumas, electroshock, and other ones that will shatter the mind into many honeycombs, separate personalities at one go. And then within each one of those compartmentalized personalities, if you know what you're doing, then you can layer trigger words, sounds, colors, smells, hand gestures within the compartment, and that can then be used to bring forth that specific personality. So you could, usually it's referred to as a front altar or a front personality. That's the daily walk around personality that people have. So they'll walk around and having no clue, because each one of the personalities inside themselves is not aware of the other one. So when you're walking around on a daily life, on a day-to-day basis, going to work, coming home, going to restaurants, etc., that personality is not aware that it could have 10, 20, 30, 40 different personalities as well. And only a specified handler or somebody else who knows what they're doing will be able to bring forth any one of the other ones. Now, any one of the other personalities could be used for, multiple ones. That could be used for sex slavery, that could be used as a Manchurian Candidate. I think The Manchurian Candidate is an interesting movie, actually, which ties in, they used symbolism of, I think it's the Queen of Hearts in the movie. When the Manchurian Candidate sees the Queen of Hearts, that's the symbol that will bring forth the other personality that would go ahead and make a hit or do what is told in terms of that. So you could have a highly trained assassin, you could have a highly trained sex professional, you could have a highly trained musician, all in these other compartments that weren't aware that any of the other ones existed and could be brought forth on command by somebody who knew what they were doing. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's the handler. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so how much of kind of what you've been through in the last 6 years have you just had to learn on your own, or researching on the internet, or getting together with other mind control victims? And how much, do you still have contacts within high up in the military or in these secret societies? Like, do you know who's doing this, and can you kind of access those people?
So we're trying to establish that the people generally who are picked and used for these programs come or are usually connections to certain bloodlines. And now on my father's side, I'm connected to the Huguenot family, which is a family which is out of Charlemagne in France. It's connected to the Merovingians. And on my mother's side, it's an opposing family, but it is still goes back to Charlemagne. So my roots on both sides of my parents come out of France, and after the French Revolution. So I think that there's a certain part of me that had to accept that my parents were connected up so that I would be born, so that I would be used for the things that I've been used in. I think that so much has been hidden from me in terms of who and what, who exactly knows what. But I have connections to people now who are helping me out, who've been gifts to me to allow me to be able to uncover a lot of things. Certainly 2 or 3 people who've come into my life who basically over the last 3 years, who specifically deprogrammed me and allowed me to come back into myself. Because I became, after I turned 31, it was too clear to me that this was going on. There was no more about me second guessing it. I knew that this was going on. I knew this would have happened. And so I had to accept it. And so I had searched for the last 5 years to try and find out more. And as soon as I truly accepted it, that's when people came into my life that allowed me to find out what had been going on. So I have connections to still now to the military people who are.
And do you suspect that you're still being used for things that you don't know about? Do you suspect this is still ongoing, and that there are still handlers out there that are triggering you into altars?
Yes. And to be honest, I don't know when or if that actually stops. I know that around, like I told you, when I turned 31, there was when there's triggers that are set into the honeycomb of the mind that when you find out too much or you realize too much, there becomes a self-destruct program. And that happened to me. and I had to. I went through a period of about 2 or 3 years where I didn't know what to do. It was felt very lonely and I felt very isolated. One of the main things they wanted to do was either get a lot of people who have gone through that around 31 commit suicide, and so there was a feeling of like hopelessness. I didn't know how to deal with it, and when I broke through and actually met a few other people, 2 or 3 other people who'd gone through the same thing, it allowed me to heal a lot more.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, how do you feel about the fact that you might still be being used for certain things and you don't even know? I mean, does that worry you or scare you? I mean, do you feel like do you feel confident you can wake up in the middle of these things and stop yourself, or?
No, that's an interesting question. Well, I still have missing time, and there's still some strange things that go on. I won't realize what's happened for maybe a 2, 3, 4 hour period, and I'll still be at home, but I won't be able to remember exactly what it is that I've done. And I've learned over the last 24 months certain words and symbols. There's often symbols and words they have to use in conjunction with each other. That I've learned how. So there are certain things that can't be used anymore. But yeah, I mean, yes, it does worry me. It does worry me, but there is so much to understand and learn about this that if I were to let that worry me too much, I think it would be off the deep end.
Yeah, well, that's great that you've been able to recover what you have already. And do you think that there's certain trigger words and symbols that they use for a lot of people, or it's individualized?
I think there is on there. I think there are symbols and words that are used. I mean, for example, with okay, so when I was a child, I used to wake up about when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I would scream, and my mother would come into the bedroom, and I would say to her that I could feel butterflies in my head. And I would feel them flapping and fluttering around in my head, and for a few years I remember feeling that feeling, and it was very disoriented. And when I was 16, I got a tattoo and on my right shoulder, and I had a monarch butterfly on my right shoulder. And I don't really remember getting that tattoo. Since I got it, actually, that symbol has been a huge trigger for me. And now the connections I've learned and kind of uncovered things that have allowed me to understand why that symbol is used. And yeah, I mean, I understand about that. What they do is generally, and generally this isn't the full reason and the full definition. When there is electroshock treatment used, when that is used on a child, they their eyes will be closed and their eyes will roll back. There will be a sensation of flickering eyelids, which will be symbolic of butterfly wings back. And I think that something like that I know that happened. So certainly a butterfly has been something that I've been connected to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They use a lot of sound frequencies, Joel, too. They use a lot of certainly. I stopped really watching TV over the last year, but certainly in commercials there are a lot of sound frequencies used, and I have a high-pitched sound in my left ear that comes and goes, and when that happens, I'll feel the shift in my personality. I'll feel myself become a different person. So I think now they have it down digitally, and it's done in more of a technological way. It's not so much done with symbols like it was 20 years ago. They use sound harmonics instead.
And so, have you ever been around someone who could help you kind of when you go into this missing time, kind of help you snap out of it, or help you realize what's happening? Or I mean, what happens if you're around friends and then you hear one of these sound frequencies? Is there anything you can do?
Well, this is all calculated very well. So this isn't going to happen when there's a lot of people around who would question what's going on. And I think there is very, very subtle differences in a lot of the personalities that are there. So unless it was somebody who knew me extremely well, they're I mean, they wouldn't know. I mean, they wouldn't know. I mean, there's a couple of people in my life who are hyper aware of when that happens. But generally, if I'm around people, they wouldn't have a clue at all.
Hmm.
And if something was to trigger in a larger sense for me to do something on a larger scale, I wouldn't be around other people.
Right. That makes sense. And so, am I understanding it correctly that you've been used for certain jobs for the elite that may have even included being an assassin?
Right. I can go into that. I kind of didn't want to touch on that now. We can go into that later on.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So, where would you like to take this now? Is there anything that you want to talk about?
I think it's important to understand where the basis of this came now, and the connections to Aleister Crowley, and their connections to World War II and what happened there. And I think that understanding at the end of the Second World War, I think that the Second World War was, and this is standing on a lot of people's feet, but it was a manufactured war, and I think there was so much there were many double agents going on, and people working for both sides at the same time, like they do often, of course. Well, at the end of the Second World War, when the Nazis were supposed to have been all trialed and then got rid of, most of them were taken to the UK, the US, and South America, and then they continued on with their work. And I think that the CIA in 1947 was then manufactured and founded on Nazi ideologies. So they basically continued their work just covertly, and the extension and understanding of mind control then continued on there, and the US was then founded. The US and the UK was then founded on a new version of mind control from the 50s and 60s. So when that's kind of where it was born out of, and I think that the Generation X, or the flower power generation, is founded on a lot of the concepts. Like the Tavistock is very important in this as well, Tavistock Institute, and my connections to Tavistock as well. And Tavistock was initially, I think, in 1913 is when the concepts of it came together. And it was founded in the Tavistock Institute in London, in the city of London, and also through Sussex University near Brighton in England. And both my parents went to Sussex University, and I went to kindergarten at Sussex University. And there were a lot of bizarre happenings when I was there. I remember a missing time there, and a lot of things that don't add up when I think about that there. I had a very close friend also who was at that kindergarten. Her name was Meredith Kennedy, and interestingly enough, her initials are MK. She also, her parents were both scientists at Sussex University, and they used to pick me up and take her and I to the university sometimes, and they would say to us, "Okay, we're going to the lab now." When we go to the lab, I would remember them parking the car near the university. So this university is an extension of Tavistock. And Meredith, my friend of mine, Meredith, was part of the Kennedy family. And when we would get out of the car to go to the lab where her parents would take us, I would then not have any memory of what would happen. And I know now, slowly, that I have flashes of what was going on then. There would be that weird feeling again. There would be that fluttering behind my eye, and a deep fear would happen. And so this I'm just trying to tie it together. So there, out of Germany, you had Freud, and Freud had basis and connections to Tavistock, and how to create and manufacture and mold the child's mind. And this is still running through Sussex University. So there are deep connections to Tavistock and me. I don't know if you know that Sussex University was the main arm outside of London of Tavistock. Did you know about the Tavistock Institute, Joel?
Yes, I know about Tavistock.
Right, and so there's connections to Sussex University and the Stanford Research Institute too. And when I was 6 years old, I spent a year in Los Angeles, just right off near where Sepulveda Boulevard is in the San Fernando Valley, and so I left. It just when I'm piecing things together, I'm realizing that there are too many coincidences here. When I was originally piecing it together, like why I know why I went there. It's just in my timeline. I went from being around Sussex University a lot to being around the Stanford Research Institute a lot, and there was also another program that was going on at 999 Sepulveda Boulevard where there was junk rooms there. Now I don't have any connection to that. I don't know. I'm just saying that was part of my timeline. I did go back to the UK before I turned 7, and I stayed there until I was 20. So there are connections from that too. What else did I want to tie it in with? I had I had an intrinsic understanding of the occult when I was growing up. I mean, I was around it. My mother knew a lot about it, but when I'd heard it from her, I just understood how it worked. I understood how and why it worked, and that didn't make sense to me. And I was always drawn to anything that was hidden anyway, because the occult is deeply connected to all these programs. All of this is a ritualistic thing. So I understood how archetypes work in terms of tarot cards and astrology. It all naturally made sense to me, and I'm not sure exactly how or why that is, but it always did. And so I didn't. When I grew up, I wasn't connected with any religion, but I was around occult things a lot. My mother was reasonably into occult, and she did a lot of pagan traditions, which I didn't see as bad at all, but I understood them and how they worked very easily, and I haven't continued along with that as an adult. It's just I've always kind of been interested in kind of unfolding that. Yeah.
And so there's an occult basis to all of the elite that are running the world and the military and the secret societies. I mean, when you really look at the power structure, it's the black magicians at the very top. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and the black magicians came. I mean, so from what I feel, the knowledge that I have, and this is just the knowledge that I have. I didn't learn this anywhere. I've kind of basically known this. That so if you look and that there was it was before the world that we know now. So around 13,000 years ago, there was two continents. It wasn't separated around like it is now. There was two continents, Lemuria and Atlantis. And so if you look really at the Atlantis was around maybe 50,000 years. I may not be completely accurate with that, but it's reasonably accurate. That when that did collapse in on itself, it collapsed due to the dark sorcerers, dark wizards that were doing what they were doing there. There's basically been a war that's been going on for 50,000 plus years between priests and the scientists. The scientists are working to individually separate themselves through technology to make themselves gods individually and govern over the masses that way. The priests have been trying to unify and collectively pull everybody together, and on a spiritual sense. This war has continued up to this day, and it's happening and it's being played out right now. It's happening everywhere around us. So it's almost like we're going through the same thing that happened 13,000 years ago again. We're going through an eon shift or a phase shift where, and it's history repeating itself again. So yes, in regards to your question, yeah, top of the pile, yeah, it's people with magic, black magic, is just a manipulation of electromagnetic energy. magic. That's all that magic is. And if you have an understanding of how to do that, and you keep keep the masses thinking that it doesn't work, that it's not real, yet you harness it for yourself, you can control everybody. And that's essentially what they're doing. And they're doing it through ritual and through sacrifice, through sexuality. And they've created a world based on that. So at the top of the military, at the top of the monarchies, at the top of any presidency, they're all using advanced high magic to run things. Everything's set out on a grid. All the architecture is connected to the grand architect. It's all connected to high degree Freemasonry, high level understanding of sacred geometry, manipulation of frequencies because of that. Back to the cathedrals, to all the building, they have an obsession with the grand architect. And just to summarize this part, when the capstone of the pyramid can then be placed back on top of the pyramid, is when the great work of ages is finished. And they feel they're just about to accomplish, or the dark sorcerers are just about to accomplish.
Right. That's when they're gonna declare that their new world order is fully functioning and they have the totalitarian structure in place.
And they're pretty close to it.
Yeah.
Happening now.
I was actually just going to ask you about that. I mean, what do you think people can do to stop this, the average person and people in general, and how do you see the balance of the battle right now?
Okay. I think that the planet itself, so rather than add my connection to all this time around, maybe in the next part that I can explain how I'm connected to it. So I'll just explain what's going on at the moment because I've been privy to information. Because the planet itself is alive, so it's going through an awakening process and stuff. So the frequency and the vibration of the planet is raising, and as the planet is connected to the people on it, as that vibration raises, the awakening and understanding of the people the fog starts to come away. And there is something called the 100 monkey syndrome, which is when enough people, it's a critical mass concept, and enough people understand or truly accept something that's going on, all of a sudden somebody else understands it and realizes it without being told it. So a lot of it is to do with acceptance, and a lot of it is to do with the biggest MK thing that we have that is on this planet, certainly in the Western world, is definitely the television. I'm not trying to be anti-Western, so but down with the music or movies or anything like that. But certainly now, not watching television like I used to, and then when I'm around it, I see symbols, sounds, and especially in commercials, and see how predictive programming and how easy it is to program masses through television. It's unbelievable, and that it's almost like the They Live scenario. There's the movie They Live.
Yeah, I've seen that film with the guy who puts the sunglasses on and then he sees which people are reptilians and which aren't. That was a great film.
Yeah, and I think that is that's symbolic all the way through. And the sunglasses is symbolic of sort of waking up. It's interesting because the sunglasses block out light, and usually you would associate light with it being illuminated and understanding what's going on. Maybe he's from John Carpenter who made that with reverse down the other way. By blocking out the light, was then allowed to heal. By blocking the light out, he was then able to see what's going on.
Interesting. And on the topic of reptilians, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's obviously still a lot of people that are skeptical of it. They just can't believe that reptilians exist. They might buy other aspects of the conspiracy, but it's just too much of a jump. I mean, personally, I completely believe that reptilians exist not only on this planet but off this planet. And can you talk a little bit about whatever experience you have with reptilians and also the connection with the royal bloodlines?
Yeah. Okay, so if we take it that the man today or people today are a building block creation of an external race that was here. So we can take, I mean, it goes further back than this. If we take it back to the Anunnaki race, who are connected to Sirius B. So the Sirius star system is actually a tri-star system. Most people think it's a binary star, Sirius A and B, but there is a Sirius C as well. They are individual and they are separate, and they have separate connections to beings. Sirius B and Nibiru, which is a planet that cycles around the Earth every 3,600 years, is connected to the Anunnaki, and the Anunnaki are a reptilian-based race of beings who came here with the trying to take Earth for, essentially they were trying to take Earth for what it had. They were trying to take the resources that the Earth had, and they didn't want to. I mean, Sitchin covers Zachariah Sitchin covers this stuff. I think that he's probably about, from what I feel, he's about 50 to 60% accurate from what he's put down in his books. I think that they did create a slave race, and they based the human race with the core part. They built the core part with the reptilian DNA, and then they put mammalian DNA around that. So, which all are now, reptiles and mammals don't work together. They don't work in harmony together. They oppose each other completely. So, if you contain a being with those two parts DNA, because we're the 99% of everybody walking around this planet has two-strand DNA, and the two strands that they have are reptilian and mammalian DNA. So this is the only consciousness that people can access, just those two streams. And those two streams don't work in harmony, so you can't, to have them in a physical body means that everybody is pretty much at war with themselves at all times. And they call it the ancient brain, and it's the, yeah, I mean, it's called the neocortex. I think the neocortex is the mammalian brain. So it's called the reptilian brain. It's the small parts, the amygdala. It's the ancient brain. And it's very real. And things like fight or flight, survival, violent sex, hierarchy, these things come from that part of the brain. It's kind of the original part of the brain. And the mammalian part of the brain is softer, and it's, if you look at how mammals treat their children in comparison to how reptiles treat their children, there's a big difference there. But everybody has that part, and the reason they built that inside, I think that's connected to when people say the original sin or ancient evil, or everybody has that, because that part is intrinsically inside of every being on this planet. And I think, and that's the shadow, that's the id that Carl Jung talks about. That's the side of ourselves that we don't want to accept that's real. And I think that also ties in with the fact that everybody has a saint and a saint or a sinner inside themselves, because they do. Everybody, I think, has the potential to be either one under extreme circumstances, and I think that's also where the basis of mind control came from. And so the building blocks of human beings were built that way, so they could be manipulated. Because if you have a reptilian brain at the core of self, and you are a reptile yourself, you always know exactly how to manipulate. So this was very carefully calculated and put together.
Yeah, that's very well said, and I completely agree with you. I think that the seed of reptile is in all of us. What about actually as far as reptilian beings or beings that can shapeshift into reptiles and shapeshift out again? I mean, what do you have to say on that?
Okay, well, so so we're taking it that every being has a part of the reptilian DNA, and then they go through that. And whilst in the womb, they'll also have tails, go through being a fish, being a reptile, being a mammal. So everybody has that. There are others who have a higher amount of reptilian DNA, who are then, if it goes over a certain percentage, and from what I understand, if it's over 50%, then there is the ability to shift, because the physical form is created by interlocking codes within DNA. And if you have the ability if you unlock, open, and relock the codes in, the DNA codes, then you would change form. And you can even see that with people with DID, multiple personality disorder, you see them interviewed. When the personality shift happens, when they change, their eye color can change, or their facial structure can change. And so we know that it's possible to change something about yourself physically, because we see that within that. So shapeshifting to a minor extent does happen. What I understand so there's something to do with blood ritual and magic, and that's done seemingly when they are trying to if you drink or if you consume any form of stuff from the adrenal glands or the pineal gland or the blood, any of the substances within certain streams, more pure streams of human DNA, it allows these particular beings to be able to hold form and walk around amongst us looking a particular way. So the question is, do I think that happens? I've definitely seen that happen before, yes.
So you've personally seen with your own eyes reptilians and people shapeshifting?
So I'm not talking about on a mass level, but I have seen before, and it's not. I haven't seen it where I'm looking and so it looks like in a normal 3D. It's more like I'll see the energetic body of the person. So there's around the auric field, the layers of the auric field. If you for me, if I let my eyes go and defocus, it's almost like looking at one of those magic eye pictures, those old magic eye pictures, the ones you have on the wall, where they're just a bunch of dots. But if you look at them and let yourself react, the picture comes out almost like that. I can see the energy field, the actual energy field of what that person is. So rather than the shape-shifting thing, not that, but I know that does happen. But I'm saying I can actually see the real version of what that person is.
Wow, well, that's amazing. That's a great ability to have.
I think that was fun. I had that since I was a kid, and I think that when you are told time over and over again that it's the man in the closet, or it's the boogeyman, or when you're told so many times that that what you think is fantasy, you tend to ignore those gifts and you repress them and you push them down. But I've always had a connection to the child self that I have. I've always been able to relate with that part of me, no matter how much it was hid around. I think I have because I had to do this, because I have to speak about this. I was always there was protection that I had, and I think there's the child innocence. That's why children are manipulated, because when they come through here, they have such an open mind that's not distorted by to this 3D reality that we live in. So I'm able to go back and harness those energies that I had as a child, so I can still see those things. But certainly for a long time, was repressed and pushed down again. And when it would come up, I would have anxiety and fear, because you don't want to be different. When you see things that you're told that are not told by everybody else that aren't real, there's a sense of like, am I crazy? What's wrong with me? And so you push them away again. So those abilities are pushed down. I think all these abilities are dormant within inside everybody. And everybody has these. I'm not special that I have it more so than everybody else. I just think that they are repressed so much so, especially with chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and food, and toothpaste, fluoride, etc., etc. So these abilities are repressed, but I think everybody has them.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Just a final couple of questions on the reptilian topic. There's been various people who've reported being personally present at rituals where they've seen certain members of the British royal family, for example, shapeshift and turn into reptiles. And they've also seen certain prime ministers or presidents do it. Do you have any experience in that, or do you know anyone who's had those experiences? Can you comment on that?
So that goes back to the bloodline thing again. I think that you have to understand that the British royal family are deeply entrenched in the Merovingian bloodline, and the Bush family are deeply connected with the British royal family. All these bloodlines interbreed and intermarry within each other so that they can maintain this certain DNA stream with these certain abilities. Also, the consciousness that's controlling everything here wants to be able to have its hand in what it's doing, and there's something about these specific DNA streams which are more easily controllable than other ones, who disassociate, who separate off a lot easier than other ones, and who are corruptible more than all the other ones. I can definitely tell you that I have had flashes and images connected to Prince Charles, and interestingly enough, it's funny because the Jimmy Savile thing broke not that long ago, and I had always felt like there was connections to stuff to do with him, and it's like when these people die, it frees a lot of the people who have been abused by them, and so then the memories are allowed to resurface. While this person is alive, the memories are still repressed. So that his death kind of broke open a dam for a lot of people to realize, hang on a second, and something happens. He's deeply entrenched, deeply connected to the British royal family. So in the images and things that I've had, and the memories that I've had that came through connections to certainly the British family and certainly Prince Charles, and I had flash memories of Jimmy Savile too, who was basically a gopher for them.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then what about, I don't know if you know much about this area, but Stephen Greer, for example, talks a lot about programmable life forces and how the government is manufacturing greys and reptilians and different species, but they're not actually real. They're kind of clones or machines, but they look real. Can you comment on that?
I think that the programmable life forms, PLFs, they are a lot of the greys that are here. I know that the Zeta particularly are life force and a life unto themselves. But there are a lot of times when there are abductions that go on, that when people see these almond-shaped eyed, big-headed beings, that they're just cloned life forces to do the bidding of higher ups for them. I know that cloning has been going on for a very, very, very long time. It's interesting that the sheep was called Dolly. That they said that was the first cloning that went on because it's funny, even with Dolly Parton, the 60s kind of temperatures, in her name, her name has doll parts, and she was one of the first ones that was manufactured and put together to see how the public would react to that creation. So there, from what I understand now, there are multiple clones of certainly every power leader of every country. And at this point, unless you're sensitive to that, and aware, and you wouldn't know. I mean, it's so real. It's been able to be programmed, memories downloaded, placed within these clones so they act, and you wouldn't know. And I think that has a lot of the connection to what happened with me. I think this is what I've come to the conclusion which makes the most sense to me. And this isn't trying to abstain from any responsibility, but I think that when I've had to do certain things, that there's a high possibility that they will at that point replace with a clone, and so that the person that you're with would have no clue. The people who you work with would have no clue, because maybe it's 24 hours, 48 hours. Maybe they think you were sick, maybe they think you were something, but they wouldn't have any clue that you weren't there, or they wouldn't suspect it. And I think that does happen.
Wow, yeah, that's very interesting, and that's just a whole new world for people to consider, that there's clone beings walking around, and that these beings can be, implanted with memories, and I know Michael Prince mentioned that having a lot of clones of yourself is not something you necessarily want, because
you're always connected with the clone. However many clones there are, there's always like a heart or a spirit connection with the other clones. So it's like shattering yourself off into many pieces. And when a clone of you gets hurt, tortured, or damaged in any way, there is, because there's such a deep connection to the source, the original self. That self will also feel it. So it also doesn't allow the consciousness. I mean, the consciousness isn't split up between the clones, but it is certainly that if a clone of you gets hurt, you'll feel the effects of it. So you're not able to be in yourself as much as you want. I felt a lot of the time that it's very hard for me to center myself, to fully pull myself back into myself, and I think that's connected to what we're talking about.
Sure. What about transhumanism? Kind of jumping topics a little bit now. You know, that there's a lot of people out there in the media promoting it, saying it's going to enhance humanity, and you know, selling it basically. I'm highly skeptical of it. I don't think that it's good for the human body to insert, you know, metal devices or implants or parts into it. I think that's ultimately going to lead to ill health, disease, and death.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Do you want to comment on this whole push towards transhumanism?
That's connected to the war that's been going on between the scientists and the priests, and I think that the more you separate from self, and the more you separate away from like divine self or heart self, the more easily controlled you are. So if you make a fusion of a machine and man together, then you take away, you're pushing yourself further away from heart. So it separates from that. And I think that's the reason for it. It's almost like humanity, in its present sense, has outgrown its use for what it was used for. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. They're not happy with how it is. So they want to use as much technology in human beings as possible, so that they can more easily be controlled. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're chipped at this point. And I think when there was mass vaccinations going on, there's nanotechnology that's in the vaccinations that's then added to people, so that they can be tracked that way. And I think even it's like a stepping stone thing. I mean, even with cell phones. When everybody then carried a cell phone, and then everybody has GPS, and everybody is tracked that way. That was the beginning of it. And I've even heard that I know that they had the technology to do this already, but they're trying to sell the concept of having Google already downloaded in nanotech chip in your head, so that you can pull that up at any time to get information. Well, then, you've got to think about who's giving the information. And so then you become reliant on something else, and you don't think for yourself. And it separates, eventually what will happen is the essence of the person. So the original consciousness, the original thing that came here and inhabited the body in the first place, will just step out. And it won't be there anymore. So you'll have drones. You'll just have drones walking around. Like with the bees, you have a queen bee, which is essentially sits there and collects, and the other bees fly around and bring back to the queen bee, because they are supposed to do it. They don't know why they do it, but they're doing it because that's their job. And that's what they're trying to do, is create a hive mind, one single hive where everybody is connected to everybody else. And there is an elite hierarchy, and it's controlled from the top. And I think that when you look around you now, a large percentage of people that are around are actually empty vessels and not thinking for themselves at all. And there's a lot of people that don't want to, and have given their power away to the quote queen bee, and are happier that way, and happier not to think for themselves. So slowly people are giving their power, I guess that people are giving their power away, and it's easier that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I observe that as well, and I think you're spot on about your observations. I think humanity is slowly kind of been computerized and turned to drones, and it's a real danger. And I think what's tied in with this is also emotion, because clearly the reptilian mindset that's running the elite wants people to follow orders in a hierarchical fashion and not think for themselves, and also not to show too much emotion, because that can get in the way of like following orders and carrying out your duty and all of that. And so, when you talk about how if we get too far away from our true self, our heart self, I think you're right, because it's really about returning to the heart and feeling more, and balancing the left and right brains, and balancing thinking with emotion, and not becoming just too emotionless.
Yeah, I mean, and also you have the energy points on the body, the chakra energy points from the base to the crown, and the easiest one, or the one that they control easiest, is the base, or the root chakra, and they do that through. They've inverted everything. They've flipped everything on its head. So they've turned it seems like every single system that we have in the world now does the opposite of what it says it's going to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I don't know if you're aware of that really great quote from Michael Elner, where he said, "Just look at us. Everything's upside down. Everything's backwards. Religions destroy spirituality. Lawyers destroy justice. The mainstream media destroys truth." I'm paraphrasing it a bit, but doctors destroy health, etc.
And that's the basis of Satanism too. It's inversion. They've inverted everything. I think a lot of when there was when they do the beginning of MK Ultra, well, they switch around the pleasure and pain sense. So I remember going around in my head over and over and over again when I was very little, and they would say to me, "Just remember, pleasure is pain, and pain is pleasure." And so I've gone through the vast majority of my life doing things that would be self-destructive because I thought that would be beneficial to me. And that's another inversion. Everything is inverted within the satanic doctrine, and that Satanism comes from the reptilian brain, and it denies anything to do with emotion or compassion or empathy for others, and empowers anything to do with control or hierarchy or intellect. It's all about that, which is the male side, and the female is repressed. Female is creative force, and what they've done is that all the female points on the planet have been repressed with different stone structures or different energy grid points. They repress the female energy because the female energy is a threat to the way the system stands right now. And they empower the male, and that's why you have all the phalluses, the obelisks everywhere, which is empowering male energy. Negative male energy is war, conflict, continuous war, breaks, then continuous war. And I think that this has been promulgated and pushed into a lot of the ideology which is being forced on now, the destruction and submersion of female, and the empowerment of male energy. And that's why the Fourth Reich concepts don't have females in any positions of power at all. The female is only seen as somebody to procreate. Is seen sexually or in terms of to make babies. Because if you have a female having any say in anything, then it will take away from the raw male energy, which is without compassion. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yep. And that's what we're seeing in the world, an overly dominated, kind of ruthlessly calculated and cold world, with a real lack of empathy. Is there anything you would agree with as far as the aims of the New World Order, or do you think like everything about it is kind of backwards and satanic and it needs to be overthrown?
In terms of the way that it's put now, the way that it's put out, I mean, I'm divided on it inside of myself and what I feel. There's a part of me that feels that people have so much they've thrown away their power so much that there has to be a change, and there has to be something that's going to shift. And that a lot of the people on this planet now are willing to sell themselves out for themselves, or willing to do anything to further themselves. So there has to be some form of change. And a lot of people are going to cease to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years. The vast majority, uh, the higher percentage of people on this planet will cease to be anymore. They'll just not be here because they won't be able to function. As the vibration raises, they won't be able to function. Is there anything that I agree with? In its current state now, I think that the only way to move forward is to shift out of this way. If you give me some examples, I'll tell you if I agree with it or not.
Well, maybe just the whole eugenics thing and the survival of the fittest and overpopulation, and so we've got to reduce population, like that whole aspect of it. I mean, do you think it's a myth that there's overpopulation, or do you think something does need to be done?
I think the overpopulation thing is pushed forward by the Fourth Reich, and they have always been, because the beings that are the Aldebaran beings that are the Fourth Reich have always felt they need more space. They need more space. They're obsessed with having more space. I don't think the figures that are given out about the population of this planet are accurate. I think there's a lot less than 7 billion people on the planet. There certainly isn't enough to be able to be given to everybody, but so I mean eugenics. No, I don't agree with eugenics. No, I don't agree with the way that they're going about it. No, I definitely don't. I don't think that it should be done that way. I think that there is an argument that we've gone so far down the road now of not understanding what's going on, that even if you told people the truth now, they wouldn't be able to accept it, no matter how it was put to them. So I don't know how. I don't know what the other way forward is, because I was indoctrinated with these principles, with these specific principles, and it was only as I got more recently now that I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. It should be followed. I don't have a solution to how to change it, but I don't think it should be done that way.
Right. Maybe we could jump topics now and talk a little bit about the IBIS project, because I know we haven't really talked about that much, and I know you've been able to reconnect with some of the kids that were part of that. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Now, the details that I have, I've learned bits and pieces. So I mean, this ties in with my footprints, and I don't want to talk too much about my footprint. So there's connections to Canada. I think there's connections to Canada, and it originated out of Winnipeg, Nelson, in Canada. And from what I understand is it began in 1972 and ran from 1972 up until the beginning of 1980. And I think that what they were it's an extension of the Nazi Überman project. So we're trying to create a perfect race which is connected to like the inner earth beings. And so what they were trying to do is they bred certain children using mothers as carriers, and then they took the children, and then they, when they were born, grew up the early years of their life in the military bases, and they were fed from without having connections to a mother, and were fed intravenously from machines. So there was connections. So they were trying to create when they make these beings, when they make these children, they are made quote unquote in testament. So they're pulling DNA from all the highest sources they can understand, from what they understand as the most powerful form. They put them together, and that almost becomes a trap for a higher vibrational soul. And that soul will see that lifetime pull itself into that being, and then from there they then create. They're trying to create the perfect soldier or the perfect uh, from the IBIS project was created to create the perfect search. And IBIS is connections to Thoth in Egypt, and Thoth comes from Atlantis, was the high priest king in Atlantis for like 50,000 years. So my connections go back to that. My mother was there. Both my parents were there in the beginning of 1976. I wasn't born until December 1976. And I said, but I don't have any documentation that says that I was definitely part of that. All I know is the parallels that go there. And now my early memories were connected to the UK, London, and Sussex. So that's really my cause.
Okay, and how many other people have you been able to connect with in your situation that were part of some of these mind control programs and that are deprogramming now? And can you talk a little bit about what similarities you've been through and whether you've been able to help each other and things like that?
Right. Yeah. So the Project Monarch, which is the one I talked about earlier on, and another thing about Monarch butterflies is that they always tend to flock together. They always find you can separate them. This is specifically with the butterflies, you can separate them, and they will always kind of they always flock up and find each other again. And that's kind of the same with this project. Even though a lot of us who've been through those things as children, when we become adults, we magnetically and energetically draw back to us, the people that we were involved with as children. So it's just it's an energetic attraction because of the intensity of what goes on with those projects. So I think that I've been dealing with them my whole life. I think I've been running into those people who've been connected to that my whole life. I just didn't know, and they didn't know that we were. Because it's a very sensitive topic in terms of, because of the extreme nature of splitting the personality, it's very touchy to have to talk about with other people, and you have to be careful. But I found numerous people, certainly at least 10, who have gone through similar things and who are now openly talking about it. I think there is such a stigma attached to it for people thinking that you're crazy for even talking about it because it is so. Because it is because of the nature of what it is, it's not supposed to exist. And conventional science, conventional media says it doesn't exist. That people are so frightened to step on that. But yeah, I have, especially the more that you speak about it, or the more that I've spoken about it, just putting the information out there energetically draws people who've been through similar experiences. And to speak to other people who've been through that is incredibly profound. And I think that is the glue that's holding all of this together is the silence attached to it. And I think there is a symbol. There's this symbol I remember from being a kid a lot, and it's very simple. I've seen it a lot of times growing up and in media since I've been an adult. That was always to keep quiet, to shut up, to don't say anything about it. And the more people don't speak about it, the more that it's going to be held together. So, yes, I think it's very intense for you, like I said, John, because of the nature of what it is and what's attached to it, what people have gone through. And, something like 80% of people who have gone through more than that, 80 to 90% of people who have gone through these projects have died. I've died or ended up in institutions that have not been able to handle it. So, and like I said, there's a system set up in the head, in the mind, when you start getting too close to certain things that you're not supposed to be close to, then there are kind of gatekeepers around the different alters of the different personalities, and the gatekeeper will allow you to go any further, or a thought will then be pulled from your head, so you will be stuck and not be able to speak about it, or there'll be self-destruct programming that will then make you become essentially self-destruct in one way or another. I think, and then when you go and search for a professional, which there aren't that many, but there are some, it's always a frightening thing because the professionals are often set up there to also handle and place you back into that position again.
So you mean that the very same people, the handlers that are conducting this mind control, put out bogus regression therapists or psychologists to kind of trap you, basically. So you go to these people and you trust them, and they're not really helping you.
Yeah, and definitely, and with the DSM as well, which is it's kind of like there's a big book.
Yeah, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. I think that's in edition 5 now. It's like the psychiatrist's Bible.
Yeah. There are actually things, psychiatric disorders that are set up, that were created and put in there, so that when anybody starts to find out about those things, when anybody starts to realize that can be a diagnosis that you can be given. This is what's happening to you. This is what's happening to you. And they start giving pharmaceuticals out, which are horrendous to sensitive people. And you've got to remember, all the people who are involved in these projects are extremely sensitive, highly gifted individuals. They pick these individuals for a specific reason, and then put them on these medications, and especially the SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they start to create attachments to the psyche, like negative, lower vibrational attachments start coming to the physical being, and you become essentially, once you're on it for over 2-3 months, you can become a remote control person, easily control the being. And the suicide rates for people on SSRIs are off the charts. And the company, Prozac is the one I'm thinking of now in my head. The company that created that was it's called Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly is a direct connection to one of the Nazis. It's a direct connection to the Nazis. And the majority of what's in the pill is fluoride anyway. So it dumbs you down, makes you more accepting of what you're told to do, which is always very important, and then manipulates the mind that way. The pharmaceutical industry was set up and made to do that for money and to manipulate.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This might be a good time now. Now, we don't have to go into this. It's up to you, really, because I can edit this part out if you don't want to. But was there anything you wanted to say about the Project Camelot interview? I mean, do you feel that represented your views fairly? Or, I mean, is there anything you have to say on that, or should we just move on to another topic?
Yeah. There has been so many different things, certainly over the last 10, 15 years, that I have come to understand about myself. And so I feel, so when I go to certain topics to talk about certain topics, I feel there are blocks there, and certain times I can, and certain times I can't talk about that, and I don't fully understand why that is. But I'm not promoter of these ideologies. I'm not trying to promote Fourth Reich ideologies. That's not where I stand, and I want to make that clear, because I think that there was a point, I think in the end of 2010, 2011, where a fork in the road came, that I was thinking differently about how that is, and so I'm opposing on a lot of levels to the kind of like the hard fist, the iron fist of how that is. Do you have any? I mean, I'm aware. See, with the Anunnaki connections that I have. Okay, so a lot of these, the 13 bloodlines, which I'm sure most familiar with, that are controlling the planet. There are 13 at the top of the hierarchy. Out of these 13 bloodlines, not everybody connected to it is following the same agenda. They would like it that way, but in general, they're not. And a lot of these bloodlines go back to the Anunnaki, and then what people aren't realizing. There's a faction above the Anunnaki, which is the Orion group, and the Orion connection is huge. Doesn't really come up very much, but I think the Orion group, Alpha Draconis, which is another reptilian connection, are actually in control of the Anunnaki. They're the ones who handed over for a short period of time power to this group. and they are now looking to kind of, there's infighting going on between these two specific groups. There is a rebellion faction also connected to the enemy, who doesn't agree with what's going on and is trying to break free from this prison system set up that's going on. There's almost like what they created was a thought prisons, like energetic vibrational prisons which surround the planet, and they vibrate at different speeds, almost like different religions are vibrating at different speeds, and they're buzzing around the planet. And they are, what they're doing is getting people's consciousness to connect with these different thought prisons, and they don't really care which one you connect with. It doesn't make any difference because that's not the point. The point is that you connect to it and that you hold tightly onto that, because then it shuts down everything else. It shuts down all your other abilities. Once you hold on to any ideology or any concept that tightly, then you shut down the energies that are flowing anywhere else. So this rebellion faction that's going on are now trying to affect the energy grid of the planet, which is dismantling these thought prisons that are around this planet, so as to allow people to disconnect and awaken. Because it's almost like this planet is the planet of amnesia. Everybody is walking around and they have no clue why or what's going on here. And that's, I think, why atheism is pushed very hard as well. Because if you force the atheistic, scientific view of it, everything, then this is all there is, this is all you are, you were born and you die, that's it. And so, and if that's forced and believed as well, it's almost like another religion, another thought prison that's there. You can never conceive of anything greater, and it locks you into the physical body. And it's kind of like a modern day opposition to spirituality. I know atheism's always been around, but it seems to be being pushed very hard right now, and that it's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and I think there's two sides to that. You know, there's a lot of false dichotomies we see. And there's atheism on the one hand, and then you're presented with, you know, organized dogmatic religion on the other hand, and it's a real false choice because spirituality is not in there. It's either like hardcore science deny that consciousness exists, or it's complete abandonment of critical thinking and buying into dogma and trusting only faith, religion, and that's the only choice we're given.
Yeah, and absolutely, it's like you pick one or the other, but in a way, I mean, their appearances are completely different, but in a way, they're the same thing in that you are giving your power away to the one thing and letting go of anything else. And people hold on to it so tightly, almost like that they would die for it. They would die for this belief system that works perfectly in terms of manipulation, you know?
For sure, yeah. Okay. I guess we haven't really touched on yet, you know, if you could talk a little bit about the two factions that are running the New World Order. You know, I know that there's a Rockefeller Nazi Fourth Reich faction, and then a more of a Rothschild Zionist East Coast faction, and then both of those factions are allied with different reptilian races. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what's happening is that to centralize everything, what they're trying to do is that it doesn't make any sense for them to be opposing anymore. Although to maintain 3D, you have to have black and white. You have to have opposing checkerboard system set up here. But to control everything, they don't want. They understand there's a window of opportunity right now as a shift goes over. So they need to shift the way that they're thinking if they want to maintain control. So they are merging together and creating a new breed or a new species, a new bloodline, actually, a new bloodline which is going to rule for the New World Order. And they've done that. The thing is, you see, the Rothschild Zionists are also deeply connected with the Fourth Reich as well. So they have been certainly over the last 50 I think it's been a slow thing, 50, 60, 70 years. They've slowly been integrated and now they're because they for the last thousands of years they would never interbreed at all, and because they have all the documents, they have complete documentation of everybody on the planet, and so they know exactly everybody's blood type, bloodstream, and everybody, so they won't interbreed. And in the last 50 years, they have been, and so they're creating a new stream because if they continue to war, they've realized they won't be able to have complete control. So in conjunction with the new order, they have to come together and not war with each other anymore.
And would you consider any of the information that you have, do you think you've got any of it from kind of inside sources, or is a lot of it just been accessing your own memories and researching on the internet or talking to other people who are also mind control victims?
I feel that a lot of the information has been compartmentalized within inside. I have connections with because of the position that I have. I have the ability to uncover the information that's already in. The information is already there. So I've known where to be and who to speak to at exactly the right time for me to trigger me to uncover the information that's already inside. So the information is there already. If that makes sense, Joel. It's already there. It's just been covered up with amnesia. So the best way I can say it is there's been people and places that I've gone to and had maybe a conversation that had nothing to do with anything to do with this, and in that conversation, which could have been about the weather, that would then trigger me to uncover and understand things that I've placed inside myself to remember at certain times.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It's almost like there was it's almost like I implanted myself a long time ago. Now the implants the Atlantean implants that I used almost look like Christmas tree lights, and they run through the body like that on either side. And I almost feel like I implanted myself to remember things at certain times. And this period we're having right now. So this is another jump, an eon shift period right now. So on certain times at certain dates, I will remember the things that I need to remember to continue doing what I do. So I implanted myself.
Wow. So there's like a real kind of divine synchronicity to this.
Yeah, I'm not talking about 3D implants here. I'm talking about multidimensional.
Right.
So So talking about multidimensional implants that were placed there. If the physical body changes at birth and death, but we can go into that at another point. I think that there's life extension technology that was hidden in the Giza pyramids, but certainly maybe the 4D, 5D, 6D energetic body doesn't really change. Just the external skeleton, the external flesh body changes. So if you implant yourself on a 5D level, when you shift into another body, those implants will still be there. So you can remember on a higher dimensional level what's going on. So if you have the technology, you can implant yourself on a high frequency level. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Before, when you were talking about gatekeepers, were you meaning literally other people, or were you meaning different alters within yourself that would try to prevent yourself from discovering certain things?
They set it up almost like a video game. They're not actual people, but they're almost like sprites, video game symbols of a gatekeeper that's standing there. That then it's like the mind is completely like a computer system, set up like a computer system. So when you access certain information, you go down neuron pathways. You go down that this part is lit up, this part is lit up, and I would get to a certain level, and there is a symbolic gatekeeper. Although in my mind's eye, I see it as that. It stands there, and it's like a stereotypical looking gatekeeper, I think. Then it stops. So it stops me from going any further. And unless you have the trigger words or the codes to go through, you can't get through to get the information that's on the other side. So I think in all of the MK Ultra projects, the mind wasn't set up like a computer game system, where information is there, held there on a almost like a digital level. And there are multiple handlers. There will always be multiple people. Maybe not even these people will be on a conscious level knowing what they're doing, but maybe they've been programmed as well. And that they would maybe can be such so you get onto a bus or a train, you get on the subway, and you sit next to somebody. That person is then has been placed there to trigger you to pull out a different part, to go past the gatekeeper, to pull out a certain part, to make you go do something that you otherwise wouldn't have done. And that is exactly how it's worked.
Right, but that could be used for good or bad. I mean, someone could be put there to trigger you to do something that's, evil or at least, harming others. But someone could also be put there to help you do something helpful, recover a part of yourself, right?
I think that anytime you're doing something under the control of somebody else, I don't know how it could be considered you're doing something good, though. Maybe if there is somebody else there who says something to maybe help you to give you some. Yeah, I mean, when you say do something good, what do you mean?
Well, I guess see that there's two levels to this. That there's the actual manipulation and control where your brain has been set up like a computer game, as you're saying, and then handlers put specific people in your lives or flash you symbols or triggers or sound waves to do something. But then there's the other level you were talking about where you feel like you implanted yourself so that you would help recover, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if they were placed there to then help you deprogram, to help rather than actually triggering you to go do something, you may yes, and I completely agree. For example, this interview, this conversation that you're having, there could be something layered underneath the words that you're saying that allows me and helps me to deprogram or realize things that I hadn't otherwise realized.
Right.
And I think that I've become more aware, especially with the understanding of sound that I have now, that in any conversation, the communication between two people is on multiple levels. So in the sentence that I just said to you, I could be communicating 3 or 4 or 5 different things to you, depending on the inflections and the sounds that are in my voice. So my conscious mind is telling me the things that I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
The other levels of my mind are also communicating a number of different things to you. And I think that anybody who's watching this will be magnetically or energetically drawn to it, to listen to it, and it will communicate to people on numerous different levels.
Yes. Yeah. What about this label of super soldier? I mean, to you, what is a super soldier, and do you feel that's like an accurate label to apply to yourself? And I mean, do you think it's it's even an accurate label to talk about other mind control victims with?
Right. I think that it's a not a cool term, really. I think it's a kind of grandiose term that's used, but I'm connected to Project Mannequin, which comes out of the UK, which is connected to Peasmore, which is near Reading, and it's an extension of the Nazi Überman project, and what they were trying to do is create a mind-controlled soldier to be able to do those, to be able to do any number of different things. The word sort of, no, I'm not keen on that word particularly, or that phrase, but it deeply connects to me to what's gone on with me. When I, maybe in like part 2 or whatever, I'll go into that. I'll explain about exactly how that works. I don't really like the term. I don't really like the term anything super, really, because it then kind of has an attachment to it, which is greater than. I think that with the abilities connected with these specific bloodlines, I know that the consciousness that I am, the person that I am, entered the physical body that I have now, and I think that they knew that I was coming down here to be a part of this matrix system that we're in right now before I was coming here. And so I was targeted immediately. I was targeted at birth. I think I've said this before. When I was born, I had something called the Harlequin effect, which is where immediately after I was born, the line went down the center of my body and I turned two separate colors. Half of me turned purple, half of me turned yellow, and that lasted for like 2 or 3 minutes. And they immediately took me away from my mother when I was born. They took photographs, but took me away from my mother. And I believe that something was, they started with a trauma-based mind control immediately as soon as after I was born. I don't know this, but I have a birthmark on my right shoulder, which has always been extremely sensitive. And I have flash memories connected with that. And I think there was some attachment or something was done to me immediately after I was born. I think that there was a electroshock treatment done immediately after I was born, so that my mind would fracture straight away. And I think for me that they had to do it that way. And this was continued on throughout my childhood. But I think my mother remembers me her telling them not to take me away, then drugging her, and then taking me away from her immediately that something happened. Because when I tell you it, and I say this out loud, something's speaking to my subconscious mind and reaffirming that something did happen. Even though I was a baby, I don't remember it, something definitely happened immediately. This is the split that I had down the center of me, symbolically and spiritually, is connected to completely opposing my mother and father, two completely different vibrational beings, almost opposing vibrational beings. So I have, and I talked about earlier having two, like reptilian and mammalian, both contained in one body. Well, I have an extreme version of that, where I have two extremely opposing things going on in the body at one time, connected to the higher level Anunnaki-reality, and also, which is quote-unquote negative, and then a much higher vibrational frequency as well, which is also contained in the body. And so there is definitely a duality, a dual aspect to me going on, and there always has been. And I think that they, to have deep connections to the higher vibrational part of me is connected to Series A, and that being the beings that are there, which is kind of a blue race, a blue tinted blue race of beings. And they have, so like I said, the black and white side of it, they've been able to play on it. I think they needed to fracture my mind immediately after I was born so that I would be able, they could play me on both sides, almost like a double agent, almost like a spy that way, so that I would be able to get into certain places or do certain things using one side over my consciousness, and then using the shadow self, then integrating that information into that and flipping from back and forth that way. Now I almost feel like I'm giving away stuff by telling you that, but I don't think I have anything to hide anymore. That it's definitely been used for covert stuff in terms of that. It works very well because if you have an extreme light and dark that's going on, then you can play into someone's situation, a company, or anything with with one side, and then gather information. And if you can flip to the other side, you can gather information. So you literally are living a dual life. And I think the double agent part is a huge factor in my life. And that's why it was so shocking when I turned 31. And 31 actually is a profound number to this group, because it's a reversal of 13, but it's a very important number to them. And at that point, when I realized that that was going on, they expected this shock of it to be that much that I wouldn't be able to function anymore. That I wouldn't be able to function in a regular life, a regular normal life anymore, when I realized the things that I've been connected to. And almost wasn't able to handle it. But there have been incredible people who have showed up in my life at very, very important times when I almost like I felt like nothing else, I didn't know what else to do, they would show up and explain to me that it was alright, that I would be okay, and that I would be able to walk through the other side of it. So there's almost like it almost feels a little bit scripted. It almost feels like the life that I've had now has been scripted, and that people have been like certainly. Sometimes I feel like choice, even down to the decisions and choice, almost is an illusion as well. It's like the illusion of having choice. But as soon as I step back into my heart, and because it's been as a protective mechanism, because I'm hypersensitive to stuff. Being like he was saying about sound there, like that. I'm extremely empathetic to people. So if I was I'm out in a mall or a restaurant, I begin to pick up energies and feelings. I don't want to, but I'll pick them up and they'll attach to me, and I'll start feeling the way that somebody else has done. So I learned pretty early on that it was safe for me to function in the 3D world like this if I stayed in my head and stepped out of anything to do with heart and anything to do with emotions. And that works out very well for the Anunnaki side of myself, which is completely analytical, completely runs on intellect. And it felt a safer place to be, but that part of me can be killed off, and that part of me is easy to track, easy to find, and easy to shut down. So in the transition period, around 31, when I had to accept that these things had gone on, without being too cliche or anything, I literally had to accept that if I didn't sit in my heart to do with this stuff, if I didn't literally just sit and filter it all through my heart, then I wouldn't be able to survive. And I think as slowly I'm uncovering things, and it's funny, on certain dates, the information comes to me, flows to me at different speeds. So I was born on winter solstice, December 22nd, 76, and that's a very powerful. My sister was born on summer solstice. Those two, which are high level ritual days, and I think that I've been involved in rituals on those, certainly on the winter solstice. But on certain dates of the year, more information flows readily to me. And I instinctively know what point to be at, or where to be standing, or who to be around on certain dates at certain times. So the information flows back. Pretty good. Did I kind of go off tangent there?
Well, that was wonderful. I really appreciate all that information. A lot of that really makes sense. It opens up more questions for me.
It was safe for me because of the sensitivity that I have, that I stayed in my head. But then I realized after I turned 31, if I continue to do that, I wouldn't be able to function. You cannot, with the type of trauma that's gone on and the type of things that I remember that had happened, especially the sexual ritual stuff that went on. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, and I'm not blaming, and I'm not trying to blame anybody around. I just know that they were gone. And my parents were amazing on so many levels that they could do. But for me to reintegrate that part of myself into me, I had to do it through heart. Because if I use any sort of intellect to try and rationalize it, it's kind of like your mind crashes.
Exactly. That the heart is really the way back to integration for the whole planet, for everyone. That's exactly right. And I mean, that just touches on what we were saying before, the mammalian part instead of the reptilian part, integrating the female part, empathy and connection. It's, the New World Order would not be possible if more people were more fully in their hearts, because people wouldn't carry out orders or do jobs just for money, knowing that it would harm other beings. And, it just wouldn't be possible if we were more in our hearts.
Yeah, the thing is that so we're using the Indian chakra points, they seem to be able to control all of them except the heart. They don't seem to be able to have control over that, and they don't seem to understand it because they're not resonating at that frequency, because it's such a much faster frequency.
Exactly.
They can control the other ones very, very, very easily.
Yeah.
I have issues like with my throat energy and my base. like that's the place they go. Like alcohol activates the base chakra immediately. As soon as you have alcohol into the body, it does that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Right.
I'm just saying that's why that's a legal drug.
Yeah.
Because it deactivates that.
Yeah.
And so that it's easy for them to enter at that point and then control up through that way. But they don't have control of the heart. And that is the main thing that they want to have control over. They want to stick pins in it. Or they want to cut it in half. Once they break the heart, then it's game over.
Right.
It's almost that's the end game point.
Right.
And so transhumanism is their final push to completely break the heart energy so the consciousness separates out. And then they have drones everywhere.
Right. Right.
It seems to me that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And the majority of people, though, there aren't that many people who are running through heart energy on the planet. There's not that many.
Right. Right.
I think something like 10%, less than 10%.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask you now was, you've been through some, I'm sure, horrendous abuse and torture and rituals. I mean, do you feel like you've been able to forgive the people who did this to you on some level? I mean, that would be asking a lot of any person to be able to do that. But I mean, do you feel like that's one of the keys here for your recovery?
I think that any recovery for anything like that, then forgiveness would be a key to it. The other thing, otherwise you couldn't recover. I don't know if to be honest, I don't think that I don't think that I do. I don't think that I do. I think that's probably a work in progress to be able to do that. I definitely think that there's a deep sense of betrayal that I hold on to, which says that, especially with the child aspect of myself, because that's the innocence, and that was the attempt at the beginning, is to break the innocence. And so I still feel very incredibly, obviously resentful to deal with that. But going back to what we were saying before, it's not denying the shadow self. It's not denying that. If you deny the core part of the self, which is does understand hierarchy, that does understand survival, those things, or the dark side of self isn't to be denied. I think it's to be integrated into the other side of the self and to be brought to one thing. And I think that most people, and I think that's how religions and this stuff stays together in the denial aspect. When you deny that you could ever possibly do any of those things, I would never do that. And the finger pointing and look at this person, look what they do and look what I do and look how much better I am. I would never do that. Well, you would do that because that is you as well. So if you're looking at everybody else as a reflection of self, so you're walking there. So if humanity is just a shattered piece into billions of pieces that are here, but it's actually one thing, then we're just experiencing everything on a different level. We're experiencing every possible physical experience.
Yeah, that's really well said. That's how I see it as well.
It's like a shattered piece of glass that broke into millions and millions of pieces, but as part of the same whole. Just experiencing every possible 3D version of itself as an experience. So and on that level, you can never judge anybody for anything. You could, because we're doing it to ourselves. But there isn't then also, Joel, there is a manipulation. We're not being allowed to kind of grow as we should do. We're being manipulated and kind of like as a species, as a single species, we're being manipulated to go a certain way according to what it was like. I think that it was an experiment in the first place, how consciousness could have experienced 3D, how we get through understanding and experiencing 3D, and how it's kind of been manipulated off, and the experiment has failed and it hasn't worked, and now that there's a shift that's happening.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's really well said. And, I just want to remind all of the viewers and listeners about, how brave you are in doing this, because it takes a lot of guts to come out speak about this publicly and get your story out there. Not, I mean, it's on so many levels. First of all, it's a very personal, raw story for you that you're sharing, and also then there could be repercussions because you're talking about things that are highly classified and secret. And I just really want to salute your bravery for doing all this.
I appreciate that, Joe. And like if we we do a part two of this, then perhaps like what I'll do is I'll go into my direct involvement in things that I know specifically that I've been involved in, and then I can tie it in that way.
Sure. And coming back to the question of forgiveness, I mean, I think you're right that to fully forgive anyone or any group of people, there's probably many layers to it that takes many years. But I mean, do you ever still feel really angry that you're being controlled and you're still being used and manipulated? Do you ever feel like, I wish I could find out who's doing this, and I wish I could trace these sound signals back to their source and like get these people?
Because I feel like everybody now, to an extent, is being manipulated. I'm not running around worrying that I'm being. That's not my primary concern because I'm trying to heal from within inside of myself. I'm trying to fix that within inside of myself, and by doing that, every step I take further in terms of healing myself, it seems like I get more answers on the outside. So when I go through a breakthrough and understand why a certain thing happened and accept it, then the external controls tend to loosen and they have less control. Does that make sense? So rather than grabbing from the outside and trying to understand it and shake it and try and trace it that way, if I fix what's happened to me on an internal level, the outside gets healed and changed that way.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. So I mean, the more integration you do of the dark side, and the more recovery you do, the less susceptible you're going to be to all this anyway. And that's ultimately what you can control: your own mind, your own self, rather than trying to hunt down some personal agency or whatever.
Yeah. It doesn't work doing it that way. It doesn't work. They have control of the game too perfectly on an external level. They know exactly how it works and what they're doing. So if they have complete control over the masculine energy force, pretty much complete control over it. So that's the conscious, that's the outside, and so that's daytime. So the nighttime dark end, nighttime or subconscious, the unseen is the feminine energy. And I think the more that you get, for me, for anyone who's been through any of that stuff, the more that you have control and understanding over that, the easier it allows for that. That's how I fix the problem. That's how I'll stop it from happening, by controlling it.
Yeah, very good. Why don't we move on now to where you think humanity is headed? Because I mean, obviously we're in the middle of a huge war, a huge battle, and it's a battle of consciousness. And on the one hand, you can see the increasing surveillance state. I mean, you can with Ed Snowden, bringing all these leaks out about the NSA. I mean, a lot of that wasn't new to people who are really up to date and studying it, but he brought it onto a platform of general consciousness for the masses, and people are outraged at what the NSA is doing, and then transhumanism seems like it's being pushed forward all the time, more and more. It's being glorified for people to get chipped or to get smartphones or this or that, and so on the one hand, you can definitely see the New World Order is being pushed through at a really rapid rate. On the other hand, you can see all this consciousness rising all around the planet, and people are standing up against GMOs, they're standing up against political corruption, they're spotting government deception a lot faster. False flag attacks aren't working as well as they used to. So, I see both sides of it, and I'm just wondering how you see the battle at the moment, and what you think the outcome will be, and what you think humanity can do.
I think there's two timelines splitting off, and there will be access to two different timelines. And I think that, although there's multiple timelines now, I think there's going to be two definitive timelines. one timeline, that timeline that wishes to continue the consciousness and slavery that's gone on, and that will take it to another level where as soon as the transhumanism is implemented on a bigger level, you're all in trouble. I mean that then the beings are in trouble of not being able to step outside of that for a long, long time. So if we already have it that we're caught in life cycles on this planet, we keep incarnating over and over and over again because we're caught in a trap. And and this right now we're in a shift period. What's happening right now has never happened before. This changeover period. So I don't think anybody fully knows what's going to happen. But so if you get caught where technology is implemented into the being, you can get trapped for thousands and thousands more years. Keep living in 3D, keep being trapped into this level. And I think there is another timeline, which is where it's a break free, there's a complete shift, and everything about the way that things are done here will not be that way anymore. There'll be a new system implemented, a new set of rules, or a completely new way of thinking about things. And I think that that will be the vibration shift. I think that from what I can see, there's a shift from 3D, 4D into 5D. And I think at the 5D level, fifth dimensional level, on this planet, you cannot, that prison mentality, that enforcing prison that has been here for so long, cannot exist because it's too dense of a vibration to exist there. So if you follow that time and you go with it, people throw the word ascension around. I'm not exactly sure. I don't really like that word too much, but I do believe there is a consciousness shift, and I do believe that if you go to that point, then you can follow that way, and you will cease to be in the invisible prison that we've been living in now for certainly. I mean, the way that it's been now is the densest and most physical that it's been ever. There is an awakening period that's going on, but it's never been quite this dense and physical before on this planet. So like there'll be a shift around all of a sudden. It's going to fork in the road. It's going to go two ways. Do you agree with me? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I think that no one really knows what's going to happen, and that there's definitely different timelines. And it just seems like it's really in the balance right now. We're at a really critical point.
I think because everybody can't go one way, because everybody's at different points of understanding and evolution within themselves. So it wouldn't make sense for everybody to all go. We're not going to go all move because we're on individual journeys. We can all go in groups, I think, one way or another. But I don't think that people who are still enforcing the 3D prison together aren't going to raise their vibration and go out of that. So they will then have to continue on with the implementation of holding somebody else at the holding somebody else, controlling somebody else. So they will continue with that lesson.
Right. Okay. Is there anything you know about what's happening on other planets in our solar system, such as on the Moon or Mars or on Saturn and bases there?
Yeah. The Moon itself doesn't shift, doesn't change. It's not turning as usually moons do. So we only ever get to see one side of it. So it's certainly hollow too. It's certainly hollow like the Earth is hollow, and there are certainly multiple bases on there. And I think the Moon stands for the subconscious, the feminine and the subconscious, and its effects on this Earth are enormous. And it seems to me that Saturn itself has the hand in the controlling factor of what's going on this planet. And the actual technicalities, I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that there are frequencies coming from it that are then being. The moon is somehow working as an amplifier for the energy. So the ring around Saturn has something to do with the ring, something to do with the control. This is the Brotherhood of Saturn is connected to the Fourth Reich again, and the Fourth Reich has connections to Aldebaran, and I have connections to Aldebaran too. And that consciousness, those beings, are using different planetary bodies to control the jewel, which is essentially Earth, because Earth is a stargate in and of itself. So you can, if you have control of this planet, it's it allows you to do so many other things. So they're using other energy bodies in the solar system to control this planet. There's something to do with number 13 again, and lifetime after lifetime on this planet is connected with the moon. So something about harvesting souls on the moon, and they pull the point of death. There's some turning point, energy force on a multi-dimensional level at the moon, where the consciousness is pulled back there through technology. The mind is erased, memories erased, and then sent back again. This is on the normal system. The cycle is sent back again, back down to the earth again. So, and 99% of people are caught in a time loop, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay? Now, volunteers have been incarnated into bodies on this planet to try and raise the vibration, and they get caught themselves, and they get caught and they get used, and they forget what they came here for. And there's a lot of ascended masters who came down here and got caught in the illusion of the game, to gain here, and forgot what they did it for, and that was a mess. But there's a lot now who are coming together at this period of time, and this changeover, who are speaking out. Like it seems, because it almost seems ridiculous to speak out, because it's so, I mean, especially the topics we're talking about are very, very cringe, and most people will put this as well because it's been so labeled as crazy. But the people who are supposed to hear this, and the people who are supposed to hear this information will hear it, and even the energy that I'm putting out to doing this now is resonating and vibrating to the people who are going to hear it already. And those people are the volunteer consciousness who come down here to help with the split of timelines that are going on. So yeah, there are multiple bases on the moon, and connected to the Fourth Reich, and other factions as well. The Orion group have deep connections to the moon. So it's the subconscious. The moon has deep connections to dreams, and like I said, time loop cycles, birth and death. On number 13, the reinforcement of the number 13 or the letter N everywhere is to subconsciously make sure that we realize that we're coming back again. We're doing this again. 13 is Kabbalistic, very important Kabbalistically for birth and death. And so make sure that when you die, you're going to come back again. And McDonald's was very important for that. The big, that big N everywhere subconsciously reinforces the fact that your birth and death is what it is.
Interesting. Very interesting. What about Mars? Have you travelled to Mars? Do you know anyone who's travelled to Mars? What's on the surface, and what's the deal with that planet?
Memories and connections to Mars. I have memories, deep memories connected to it, and I think that used to be an abundant planet, more like this planet, and the wars that continually went on there were horrific. And there was a 100,000-year war that continued to go on and on. And Mars is the energy of Mars anyway is a masculine energy, but it was manipulated to destroy itself. The details of that war I can't pull right now. I've got it in my head, but they're still working there. They're still working on there. There are bases on Mars. There are It's a lot to do with manipulation of this planet. So by doing things on other celestial bodies in this solar system, you have access to, you have ways to manipulate this planet. Um, yeah. So when Mars destroyed itself and became a barren kind of looking land, but there's replicas of the pyramids, the Giza pyramids down here, and it's a high energy place there. There's also a hollow as well, like all the other planets here.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I know Michael Prince mentioned that he'd been there and he could actually recall what it looked like, and he said it looked like Phoenix, Arizona, and the sky was blue and there were apartments and um, yeah.
Yeah, the way that it's portrayed in movies is not the way that it's done with the uh, desolate like that. There's a living population there on the surface and on the surface. So they absolutely it does not abundant in growth in terms of like plant life, but it's people living there for sure.
Okay, and then what about deep underground military bases? Have you been in underground bases either in the US or the UK or anywhere else? And I mean, what do you know about those?
Um, yeah, so most of the dumps are that's where most of the programming goes on, because it's also to program a person has to be done under. It helps. It's better if it's done underground, because as soon as you go underground, uh, you walk into the subconscious mind. So because above ground is conscious and underground is subconscious. So each one of these military bases, the underground military bases, are placed on certain geographical areas that affect different parts of the mind depending on where they are. So I have connections. There's one in London that I have connections to, which is all below London is set out. All below Los Angeles. This is I know for a fact, and maybe for other places too, but I know for a fact. Underneath Los Angeles and underneath London, it's all the entire city itself has an underground city below it, and I have connections there. When I was a child, I was brought to the facility CLC1, which is underneath London, and vast majority of my programming done there, and it's the one that's in Los Angeles too. And I have connections to the Dulce base. Now, I was talking to somebody, and from what I can understand, it works this way when you get brought back. When you get brought, especially at Dulce, when you enter the base, when you first go underground, they have symbols on the wall as you're going there. So you're triggered in the first place, and then you go underground. And as you're driving down, or as you're traveling through, you see these specific symbols. And as you go past each one, it pulls you lower and lower. And as you're going down, further down you go, each symbol pulls you into a lower state, a deeper state of consciousness. And so you question why you're there, and as you go past another one, you realize a little bit more. As you go past another one, you realize a little bit more. And the further down you go, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now you remember who you are, you remember why you're there, you remember what you're doing. And in the reverse sense, when you come back up again, you're driven back up, you're on a vehicle back up. As you go past each symbol, it pulls you out of that slumber or out of that consciousness. It raises it back up until you got to the entrance and you don't even know why you were there in the first place. So everything is coded as you go down and as you come back up. If that makes sense.
That's really interesting. I've never actually heard anyone talk about that part of the DUMS before. So thanks for sharing that. And that really makes sense, because when you consider that symbols rule the world, not laws, that famous saying from Confucius that the world is ruled through the subconscious, and symbols speak to the subconscious, not words. It's words are for the conscious, logical, rational mind. So that makes sense.
And they're very specific symbols. They're not symbols that I see them in my head. I see the how they are, but I've never seen them anywhere else. Occasionally, but not exactly like this. These are very complex, unusual looking symbols, and they pull you deeper. They pull you deeper, and so all of a sudden you realize exactly why you're there, exactly what you're doing. I believe that I have hold a position at Dulce, and but I don't consciously have. I'm consciously completely unaware of what it is, the position that I hold. But when I'm brought down, say there's 10 or 12 symbols as you go down. When I get to the 11th and 12th symbol, I can become completely aware of the position that I hold there and know exactly what to do and what I'm supposed to do at that point. Completely aware.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so, you know, for all you know, this could still be happening. You could still be getting pulled off.
Still happening.
And so, you know, we probably need to wrap this up just in the interest of kind of keeping the interview, you know, not too long for people, and leave some over to part two. But I did want to kind of bring it back to the point of, you know, are you ever scared of talking? I mean, I know you've done a lot of interviews already, and you've come out to a large degree or to some degree already with your story, but are you worried that there's going to be repercussions? Are you worried that you know, certain people are listening to this interview right now and have their hand on the button ready to censor something if you say something, you know, controversial? Or are you worried that there's going to be physical repercussions for your safety?
I've never gone as deeply into my connections to what's going on or shared enough where I have put myself in any jeopardy before. But I'm making this, as I said, the more deprogrammed I get, the more I care about just having the information out there, and I lose fear in terms of what the repercussions are. It's on me what's going to happen. If I do something and then there are repercussions for it, I'm sure there will be repercussions for it. I'm sure there will. Something is going to happen. Something will happen from me doing it. I don't have any fear from it, though. I don't know why. I can explain about, in part two, I'll explain about how a lot of the fear, the emotional and the fear aspects were deleted, or they shut them down, and certain altars have to be shut down so that, because fear obviously controls you to do, or stops you from doing certain things that they want you to do. But I don't at this point have any fear connected to it. But I think that, as I said, it's connected to the fact that I have never really said anything that would cause them any trouble. I haven't said anything extremely different, apart from a couple of things that I've said, and I haven't said anything that would cause anybody any issues. And that's why I want to do a part two, so that I can do that and explain things like that.
Well, great. Well, again, thank you so much for doing this interview, and I think this is probably a good place to end it. If you have anything further you want to add, you know, go ahead. If there's anything you want to kind of close with.
No, I'm good, Joel. That's good.
Well, thank you. I mean, we touched on a whole range of topics today, and again, I appreciate your openness and honesty and bravery in getting this truth out, and I think this will really help a lot of people, and I look forward to doing a second part with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it.
All right. All the best, Max.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.